So today I'm going to be making a quick and easy potato soup. This one is not going to require chopping and peeling of vegetables. So you're going to start with 7 14-ounce cans of diced potatoes, or you can get this number 10 can, which is a 6-pound can. That's more of a food service item. So if you can't find that, this will do just fine. You can use fresh potatoes as well, as long as you come up with about 14 cups, which is about equivalent to what's here in the 17 cans. So I'm going to take the lids off of these and dump them in a strainer and rinse them off. I don't want to dump the canned juices and everything into the soup mixture because I want to get that canned taste off the potatoes. So there they are, strained and rinsed, and now I'm going to transfer them into a large stock pot. Large stock pot with 12 cups of water added. Now I'm going to add McCormick's chef cut onion, okay, that have been dehydrated, and that's what they look like. Okay, so I'm just going to add that, and then I'm going to give it a stir. Once you open dehydrated vegetables like onions, you have to take care to preserve them. So make sure that you do your research and figure out how you're going to keep these fresh, because onions have natural sugars and things like that can cause food poisoning like botulism and things like that to build up in a product like this. So, the question then becomes, do I use an oxygen absorber, or do I use silicon dioxide packets, which is a moisture absorber? You can't use oxygen absorbers on foods that have more than 10% moisture. So make sure you know and have a plan for how you're going to preserve these after you open them. I'm going to be using Firehouse Flavors brand vegetable broth mix to season this. But first, I want the onions and potatoes to come to a boil, because I don't want to start seasoning until I give that a taste, because, I want to see, what the flavors are before I start adding any seasonings, so that I don't get things over-seasoned or under-seasoned. Now that this has come to a boil, I'm going to drop in 4 tablespoons of salted butter. And I'm going to add 2 cups of dry milk. And I use the Carnation because it has been test tasted, and many test tastes have indicated that this is the best flavor. So I'm going to give this a stir. And then I'm going to give it a test taste because I've got salted butter in there before I start adding any other seasonings. I don't want this to get too salty. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of the vegetable broth. I'm going to give it a stir and a taste. Okay, I'm going to add a teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt. You could also use sea salt. I'm going to give it a stir and a taste, because as I said, I don't want this getting too salty. So I'm just going to add a small amount at a time. So that's 1 teaspoon, and I've turned it down on low after it came to a boil. It doesn't have to stay on a boil, it can go on low after that. There we go. Eye is off, lid's on the pot. I'll come back in 15. So why do we put the lid on the pot and turn the eye off? Well, because of evaporation. If we lose liquid, that is going to change the salt and seasoning to water ratio, which is going to change the flavor and could cause it to taste too salty or too over-seasoned or whatever. And so we don't want it to get really condensed like that. So that's why we put the lid on the pot and turn the eye off, to prevent evaporation. So this recipe makes about 14 to 16 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 cup servings. I'm using this small bowl here. Okay, and that's going to depend on the potato to broth ratio that you want to go with. Why don't we just open some Campbell's soup or whatever and let that be that, instead of going through all this? Well, for one thing, it has flour in it, and I'm not a fan of flour in soup, especially potato soup. To me, potato soup should taste like potatoes and milk and butter and a little onion. So, and maybe some salt and pepper. So, that's why. And I prefer a thinner broth. Also, the Campbell's, even though it is a very good soup and a very good seller, I'm not going to debate that. It's just thicker and there's not as many potatoes, and the potatoes also have a more canned taste. Even though these are canned, they don't taste as canned for some reason. So, so it gives you a fresher taste, a more homemade taste, without the peeling and dicing and chopping that would normally go into a homemade potato soup. So I would say this one is like semi-homemade. You know, it's a good compromise. So anyway, moving on. About the salt, I ended up adding 4 teaspoons, okay? Because you have to remember, there's salt in the canned potatoes, even though they are drained and rinsed. There is salt in the butter. There is salt in the vegetable bouillon that we're using. And so I wait until the very last minute to salt, and I felt that 4 teaspoons was good, and it gave a little wiggle room to those who may want to add more. Once it's too salty, it's too salty. There's not a lot you can do except for remove some broth, okay, and then add some water, you know, and instead of doing all that, I just stop at 4 teaspoons there. And I have a bowl here that holds about 1.5 cups, and I put a ladle of potatoes that had been pretty much drained, and then a half of a ladle of the broth. And so now I'm going to add a little black pepper to this, okay? And as you can see, it's a nice thin soupy broth, all right? And I'm looking forward to adding some unsweetened cornbread to this, probably some buttermilk cornbread, and enjoying this potato soup. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this recipe for a dump and go potato soup with no chopping or peeling. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.